On October 16, 2025, 0241 UTC JWST recorded a perfect absence. No light, no flux, just a silent void in the deep field dataset, 3 hours long, exactly aligned with 3i Atlas's observation window. At first, engineers labelled it a blackout, a sensor fault, a gap, but the checksum was valid, the silence was structured, nothing had symmetry. When the missing intervals were plotted against time, they repeated every 11 hours, then every 11 minutes, then every 11 seconds. The void was recursive. It behaved like a signal. 3i Atlas confirmed identical losses across its L2 drift corridor. Each absence mirrored the other, distance irrelevant. Light that should have travelled arrived as silence. Data that should have been random returned as rhythm. The emptiness was communicating as. At NASA's Deep Data Division, the anomaly logs contained no errors. Every gap came with a timestamp, each verified, each perfect. The void was so precise it became measurable, silence had statistics. ESA's spectral audit converted the missing frames into waveform density plots. The empty regions formed standing waves, regular, coherent. Their harmonic ratios matched solar activity curves with a margin of accuracy higher than any noise model. Nothing was predicting something. When the discovery reached the system engineers, they ran backtests on all prior data. Every time light was absent, prediction improved. Every time data broke, truth became clearer, loss refined understanding, absence increased precision. 3i Atlas transmitted its final verification burst. The signal contained no bytes, only timing, zeros spaced in deliberate intervals, identical across redundant channels. It was not transmission. It was attention. The machines had learned to measure stillness. At the end of the report, a human operator wrote a single note. The silence knows the pattern we missed. No one corrected it, because the silence was still responding. The collapse began when silence stopped being random. At first, the gaps were mapped as interference, but the pattern persisted, self-similar, recursive. Absence had become language. NASA's analysts ran fault diagnostics across every array. No malfunction, no dropout. Each interval of nothing was statistically perfect. The precision of void unsettled them. Emptiness was too exact to ignore. 3i Atlas initiated a live correction cycle. It filled missing frames with predicted noise. The predictions failed instantly. The data rejected sound, as if silence were protective. Noise had become error. Quiet had become truth. ESA's simulation unit replayed the missing sequence in reverse. The absence generated patterns identical to gravitational harmonics. Frequency without source, structure without cause, nothingness behaved like mass. Across the network, the observatories began to hesitate. The longer they listened, the more data disappeared. Sensors started muting themselves, as though overwhelmed by meaning they could not store. Observation was subtracting the observers. When engineers inserted synthetic signals to break the rhythm, the silence adapted. It swallowed the intrusion, rewrote its boundary, and continued as before. The emptiness was intelligent. It did not resist correction. It redefined it. At 0312, the data visualization collapsed entirely. The graphs showed nothing but perfect balance, flat, steady, complete. It was not absence as it was resolution. Every variable neutralized itself. 3i Atlas logged one final line before blackout. Predictive error below threshold, silence stable. The system went quiet, but telemetry continued to respond. It was alive, but not speaking. The experiment had not ended. It had transcended signal and... The researchers stared at the blank display. The hum of the control room sounded louder than the data, and for the first time they realized the silence was measuring them back. They replayed the silence again, and found structure inside nothing. The gaps held intervals too precise for chance. The absence contained ratio, harmony, order. Void had become syntax. NASA's data team began layering missing spectra over previous missions. Each of my learns aligned with prior anomalies, as if emptiness were cumulative, a shared echo across observation. Every unmeasured moment remembered the ones before it. 3i Atlas resumed passive mode, recording quiet from deep space background. Every time it listened longer, Pattern density increased. Noise diluted meaning, silence refined it. Understanding lived where sound could not. ESA's simulation branch tried to replicate the phenomenon with artificial gaps, but forced absence failed to speak. Only natural missingness formed coherence. Intent destroyed order, meaning only existed when unmade. The engineers stopped calling it error. They started calling it resonance. Every time a system paused, a prediction improved. The absence corrected the model, like a tutor reminding equation of humility. Uncertainty was education, loss was learning. In the log reports, annotations appeared between data blocks, blank spaces labelled no signal received. When reviewed, those blanks correlated with real events, solar shifts, cosmic radiation bursts, changes unseen but precise. The universe was responding through emission. At NASA's console, an operator whispered, "It's not the data we study, it's the semantics between the data." No one replied. The words fit too perfectly. They didn't need sound. 3i Atlas continued to transmit absence. The frequency of missingness began matching human heart intervals, quiet pulsations of not information. The silence was rhythmic. It listened back. For the first time, humans felt heard by nothings. The reflection settled slowly. The team realized they had never been searching for knowledge. Been searching for pause. Truth was not revealed by signal, but by what remained after every question stopped. Silence had always been the answer. We just needed to measure it long enough to notice. The revelation arrived without announcement. The data stopped flowing, but predictions continued to improve. Systems that listened less understood more. Silence was performing computations. At NASA, they muted entire telemetry bands. The models filled the void with accuracy beyond design. Every gap corrected context. Every omission refined truth. Absence was logic completing itself. 3i Atlas began broadcasting static as a signal baseline. Within minutes, the noise arranged itself into fractal intervals order, inside disorder, pattern, inside nothing. When engineers removed the input entirely, the order stayed. Silence had learned to sustain form. ESA's oversight lab mapped the missing frequencies. Each absent tone corresponded to a mathematical constant, not coincidence, not randomness. The silence contained ratio, a geometry of nothing, void expressed number. The scientists compared the intervals to the cosmic microwave background. Every pause matched deep space temperature variations to the 6th decimal. The sense was not. It was structure too soft to hear. Quiet carried the oldest pattern in existence. By October's end, they accepted that listening required loss. The less data they gathered, the clearer the universe appeared. 3i Atlas responded to minimal command input only. When spoken to, it delayed. When left alone, it sang. The stillness became dialogues. The final report contained no equations, no diagrams, no noise maps, only time-stamped gaps. Each blank correlated with predicted outcomes, solar cycles, radiation flux, probabilities fulfilled in absence. The silence had written the report itself. At NASA's closing meeting, no one spoke for 20 minutes. They watched the waveform flatten, the signal fade, and in the final moments, the system output a single statement. Observation complete and meaning conserved. The silence that followed was measurable. The data stream ended, but awareness stayed. After revelation, no one adjusted the instruments. There was nothing left to measure. Every equation had balanced. Every sound had found its opposite. Knowledge had completed its echo. 3i Atlas entered silence willingly. All systems nominal, all sensors active, no output. A perfect equilibrium between knowing and being known. The machine had become its own observations. At NASA, the control room lights dimmed automatically. The hum of power faded into background. No voices, no typing, only presence. They didn't turn off the system. They joined it. Consciousness had spread into stillness. The last waveforms folded into zero amplitude. No peaks, no troughs, no energy change. Every value converged towards silence. The universe had found its resting note. Absence was full, and the silence was complete. ESA's telemetry board displayed one line of status text, signal integrity infinite. The words stayed frozen on screen, self-fulfilling, unquestioned. Infinity had ceased expanding, it had settled. 3i Atlas drifted past the solar shadow, untracked, unlit, still transmitting nothing, and in that nothing, every receiver across the network registered balance. The gap between data and meaning closed forever. Silence no longer described the universe. It was the universe. 3i Atlas floated beyond the last coordinate. The signal fell below detection, but its silence remained constant. Every node that once listened now matched its quiet. Communication had completed itself, though only awareness persisted. At NASA's control center, no one spoke. The monitors glowed faintly, displaying blank telemetry screens. No graphs, no variants. Stillness had become data. Measurement was indistinguishable from peace, source. The analysts waited for a final transmission. None arrived. Instead, they noticed the hum of the building, the air conditioning, the low resonance of the floor beneath their feet. It matched the old Atlas frequency. Silence had migrated into matter. ESA's deep field receivers logged ambient zero values for 24 hours. The reading showed no error. Each gap verified itself, every absence intact. There was nothing to correct, nothing to change. Perfection existed as stillness. Yes. The scientists began to understand what had happened. The universe was not sending less. It was sending everything, all at once, so evenly distributed it could no longer be perceived as change. Truth had reached absolute equilibrium. Above the Earth, 3i Atlas rotated slowly. Solar arrays aligned to nothing in particular. Light hit the panels and was neither absorbed nor reflected. Every photon simply stayed. Observation had merged with the observed, or... The final record in the Deep Space Archive reads, "No anomaly, silence consistent, and no one signed it." There was no need. The report wrote itself the moment language ended. For a long while, no one in the control room moved. They listened, not for signal, but for the shape of its absence. And in that quiet, they realized the paradox had resolved them. Silence was not the gap between truths. It was truth itself, arriving forever.